If we measure human history by our physical bodies, the story starts roughly 300,000 years ago. That is when anatomically modern humans, people with the exact same brain capacity and neurological hardware we have right now, first appear in the fossil record. According to the standard historical timeline, we spent about 294,000 of those years doing almost nothing. We lived as simple hunter-gatherers until about 6,000 years ago, when we suddenly decided to invent agriculture, write down our thoughts, and construct massive, complex cities in places like Sumer and Egypt. Look at that gap. We had all the modern mental equipment, yet we supposedly waited thousands of generations to build anything recognizable as a civilization. Mainstream archaeology treats this vast empty space as a given. It views humanity as a species with collective amnesia that woke up yesterday and suddenly learned how to build a society. The 6,000-year timeline encountered a physical contradiction in southern Turkey. A site known as Göbekli Tepe. Looking at this excavation, you can see massive, T-shaped megaliths that weigh up to 20 tons each. The builders carved intricate animal reliefs into the stone and arranged the pillars with precise astronomical alignments to map the stars. The problem for historians is the date. Göbekli Tepe is 11,600 years old. It was constructed during a period when humans were strictly categorized as scattered hunter-gatherers, supposedly lacking the agriculture and social hierarchy required to organize complex labor. Organizing and feeding a massive workforce to erect a sophisticated astronomical site requires a system. Göbekli Tepe sits firmly in the archaeological record as physical proof of a missing chapter, a highly organized human society operating thousands of years before we were supposed to know how. To understand where that civilization went, we have to look at a radical geological interruption 12,800 years ago, an event known as the Younger Dryas Boundary. At that time, a massive comet entered our solar system from deep space. Pulled by the sun gravities, it broke apart into thousands of fiery fragments, turning a single cosmic bullet into a shotgun blast that intersected Earth's orbit. As the Earth turned through this storm of debris, fragments entered the atmosphere. Most exploded in the air before even hitting the ground. A single 100-meter fragment detonating in the sky generates an airburst equivalent to a massive nuclear weapon. Earth took thousands of these hits. The intense heat from those airbursts sent the North American and European ice caps into an instant meltdown. This triggered a sudden, catastrophic pulse of meltwater that raised global sea levels by roughly 400 feet. If you were living during an ice age, you wouldn't settle in the frozen misery of Northern Europe. You would build your society along the coastlines and down near the equator, the exact landmasses that were instantly submerged by that rising water. This extreme climate shift operated as a global cataclysm. The surging oceans scrubbed the physical footprint of the human populations settled along the world's most prime real estate. When searching for remnants of these people, we shouldn't look for industrial markers like cell phones or combustion engines. We are looking for a culture that mastered the physical world, specifically navigation, ocean seafaring, and geography. Physical evidence of this survives in inherited source material, passed down through generations, and eventually compiled into documents like the Orontius Phineus map of 1531. If you look at the southern portion of this map, you will see a massive landmass labeled Terra Australis. It depicts the coastlines of Antarctica with highly accurate relative longitudes, nearly 300 years before modern explorers officially discovered the frozen continent in 1820. Solving the problem of longitude requires precise chronometers that our society didn't invent until the 1750s. Furthermore, this map shows Antarctica exactly as it looked during the Ice Age. The mapmakers of the 1500s were copying source data inherited from a global seafaring culture that mapped the world before the Great Freeze ended. We find similar mathematical patterns at Giza. The Great Pyramid functions as a massive ancient data storage device, communicating exact planetary dimensions. The builders laid down 6 million tons of stone, incorporating complex internal corridors, and aligned the entire structure to true astronomical north with an error margin of just 3/60ths of a single degree. Multiply the Great Pyramid's height by 43,200 to get the exact polar radius of Earth. Multiply the base perimeter by that same number to get the equatorial circumference. This 1 to 43,200 scale represents the precession of the equinoxes, Earth's slow, deliberate axial wobble over thousands of years. This specific scale, derived from a slow astronomical wobble, points towards a level of planetary knowledge that shouldn't have existed 4,500 years ago. It suggests the builders were working from a blueprint inherited from an era far older than our current timeline accounts for. The human timeline is not a straight upward path of continuous progress. The physical anomalies point to a severe cycle, a rise to sophistication, a devastating reset, and a slow collective recovery. We carry the memories of that reset. Across the globe, independent cultures share survival myths, like the flood of Noah or Plato's account of Atlantis, and they share a remarkably similar explanation for why the slate was wiped clean. These traditions describe a civilization that started in harmony, guided by healers and sages. Eventually, they stepped away from that purity. They became deeply arrogant, obsessed with material power, and began imposing their will upon the rest of the world. The ancients rarely viewed themselves as passive victims of a random comet or a shifting climate. Instead, these myths insist that their own hubris, cruelty, and disconnection provoked the cataclysm. When we hold that ancient warning up as a mirror to our modern era, the reflection is difficult to ignore. We are a deeply divided species, generating immense psychological toxicity. We operate with a blind arrogance, treating our technological supremacy as an absolute shield, while remaining dangerously disconnected from the natural world we rely on. The sheer scale of this underwater nuclear detonation, dwarfing the naval fleet above it, illustrates our current capacity for self-destruction. We have built the tools to engineer our own global reset. We dismiss the myths of a lost civilization as primitive superstition, confident that we are the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. That very dismissal is a symptom of the exact arrogance the ancient stories warn us about. Unless we wake up to the lessons of our missing history, we tick every single mythological box to become the next buried mystery, waiting for a future civilization to uncover.